Hey guys, it is Teal from tealyielding.com. So you have asked and I am going to deliver. I've had a lot of people ask me about Disney, especially since we just got back from our family trip to Disney, I guess a couple months ago. And I want to share some of our best tips with you. We have a few family trips under our belt. I'm not an expert, I'm not a travel agent, anything like that, but I have done some planning and planned some trips to Disney, which I think were fairly successful. We had a great time, and I want to share some of those tips with you guys. So I was trying to figure out where I was going to start with this series, and I could take it a million different ways, but I'm going to simplify it in this one and really just focus in on avoiding the crowds at Disney. And let me tell you a little story. I had a friend or an acquaintance, I guess you could say, that we were in a group on Facebook. We don't live near each other. I'm not even friends with her on social media, but we were in a group together on Facebook because we were planning to be at Disney around the same time, and it was sort of like a planning group with other moms, and we could discuss a few things in the planning process. And we all went through the planning process. We went on our trips, and she came back from the trip and posted in the group about what a horrible experience they had, about how hot it was, how crowded it was. They waited in lines all the time, and they had a miserable time. And honestly, I can't say I blame her, because if I felt that way, I would call it a pretty miserable trip too. But the kicker is we were there the exact same week, the exact same time. I even bumped into her one day at a park. And so there's a secret to avoiding the crowds at Disney. And some of the Disney veterans know these tips, and I'm going to share it with you guys today. So in this first part of this series, I'm really just going to focus in on a little bit of the planning that goes involved if you really want to avoid crowds at Disney. That was important to us because I don't want to wait in line. I want to minimize my time waiting in line so we can maximize the fun, right? So plan ahead, and that sounds kind of complicated, but I'm just going to break this one into just a couple tips for you guys. So the time of year that you go to Disney can play a part in the overall crowds. There are certain times of the year that are traditionally lower crowds than others. A general rule of thumb is if school is out, the crowds are up. If there's a holiday, the crowds are up. If it's summer, the crowds are up, and so is the temperature. Those were all things that we wanted to avoid. Now, I will say, with a little bit of proper planning, I don't really think it matters so much the time that you go. We have been to Disney World during off-peak times and during peak times, and there wasn't a ton of difference in our trips in terms of what we were able to do. So I just want to share that tidbit with you, that planning is so important. But if you want to choose a time of year, if you're flexible enough to do that, if you want to choose a time of year to go with lower crowds, typically early fall, January, February, or the beginning of May. I'll be honest and say we've never been at one of those times, and we have had great experiences and don't wait in lines. Another thing to consider, as I mentioned, the school calendar. So if schools are out, there's going to be more families at Disney. So one thing that I've used for all of our trips, and I love it, is a resource I found online that is a crowd forecast chart for Disney World, but is based around the school calendar. They take the school calendars from the large school districts across the country. They tabulate all that info so you don't have to, and they figure out who is out of school when, and they convert it all into a chart and tell you the best times to go to Disney based on that. We use that chart every single time, and it has yet to fail us, even though we have never been at those true low season times. I'm going to share that chart with you in the blog, as well as a site that I used where I got it from. So when I get this up on the blog, you'll be able to use it there. It is a great resource, and it's never failed us. Another thing that has helped us is you want to plan where you're going to be every day for your trip. And that sounds super OCD, and believe me, my husband completely rolled his eyes at me the first time I told him we were going to plan every day of our Disney World trip. But he was thanking me at the end of the week, because here are a couple tips that really help with that. I will go through and pull up the park hours for all the parks, and I'm looking for something called extra magic hours. I won't go too much into that, but basically If you're staying on site, there's a perk called Extra Magic Hours. It's typically one park a day that either has morning or evening Extra Magic Hours. That means you can come an hour before opening or you can stay later. I'm looking for the park that has the early morning Extra Magic Hour. Why? Because I'm not going to that park on that day. We can't bear to get up any earlier than normal, so we are not going to drag ourselves out of bed at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. or whatever time it is, an hour ahead of normal, to make it to a park. So I use that calendar to figure out where I don't want to be when I'm planning my days. And I even take it a step further. Whichever park has the Extra Magic Hour, let's say Magic Kingdom has Extra Magic Hour on a Monday, I'm not only not going to go on Monday, but I'm going to go on Tuesday, because everybody went on Monday, or most of the people did, and they had their fill and they had so much fun in the park, and you know what? They're ready to move it on and go to another one. That's when we want to go. So that is how I plan my days. I do that for every park. I know it seems kind of complicated, but I promise you it helps in the end in terms of planning out your days and avoiding the crowds. So that is all I'm going to discuss in this part of the series. These are some things that have really helped us have great Disney trips and avoid the crowds. And you can have a great trip no matter when you go, but a little bit of planning definitely pays off. So stay tuned. I'm going to talk more up next about a specific daily plan, like a plan of attack, and how to go about that so you can continue to avoid those crowds at Disney and have a great time.